Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Ra Twilly and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar, titled Masterclass, Zoom In on IDS, is going to be delivered by Menno Mekes, BIM specialist at Arons and Gelauf Architecten. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour and 30 minutes with a short Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available for replay on our website. I would like to remind you that phone lines will remain muted for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the chat function located within the control panel, and we will get to those at the end. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that the participation in the development of standards is unrestricted, and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. Now I'm going to hand over to Menno Mekes, who will begin the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Ra. So, am I really going to explain IDS in, well, an internet full of people that probably know more about IDS than I do? Yes, and not just that. I want you to pay attention, so you can repeat my words to the future users out there. The new technology only works when it's get adopted and used. And that's hard when technology and open standards are being developed by programmers based on API first. Now, as a user, a modeler, I want to get to know the technology, dive deep into the standards. Now, I think I understand IFC quite well. Well, I should, but still I need tools. I need software to create. I rely on the Revit exporter with all of its options. So how do I get a consistent and uniform reference? Do I turn checkbox number 27 off or on? Well, I think we got the IFC export covered for all BIM softwares, versions aside. Other younger software also have found its way into our daily workflows. In so many tools support BCF, but in what way? We go to the BIM in practice meetups to test the different tools and pinpoint the things they have in common. And from there, a grassroots initiative is born, the BCF card. Now for IDS, a standard under construction, tools are beginning to appear. But once again, users will have to wait for developers to create tools. Now, fortunately, I understand just enough to help one of those companies to build usable tools. My name is Menno Mekes. I'm a building engineer who loves architecture. I'm the secretary of the BIM-based IDS expert committee, and I'm part of the team that created the material naming convention called NACT. I'm an IFC and open BIM enthusiast. I like to see myself as an improver of BIM usage in the Netherlands. So I want to start with the BIM-based IDS, the Dutch initiative to improve the quality and consistency of aspect models from the start. So yeah, I do know what an IDS is, but this is not IDS, the open standard. And what you see here is what we want to see in all of our models, at the bare minimum. And I'd like to explain the BIM-based IDS a little bit more, because throughout this presentation, I will refer to it quite some time. What you see is the BIM-based IDS it's an infographic we have 4 chapters. 1 and 2 are simple. Why do we exchange information, and how do we do that? Well, how is through IFC. I don't need to tell you anything about that, of course. And then we have the 2 big chapters. Chapter 3, what we agree upon for every aspect model, and chapter 4 is what we need to have in the aggregated model. So basically, we have a lot of tiles that says what we want to see in our models. And chapter 3 is really about the structure of that model, of every aspect model. So that's very important for everybody. And chapter 4, it has some more properties, some more things that we need in at least one of the models. For example, tile 4.1 is about spaces. And spaces is only, they probably are only in our architectural models. But MEP systems, yeah, they're only in MEP models. Same for load bearing is something that you only will probably only find important in structural models. So those are the difference between chapters 3 and 4, but together they are what we really want to see in the aggregated BIM model. Now this is just the infographic, and this is for everybody, creators and checkers alike. And what's so great about this initiative is that we don't stop with just the infographic. We also have a website where you can click on all of the tiles with descriptions and info and tips. And we also don't stop there because we create manuals for the software as well. So yeah, I am an active member of the Dutch BIM community, but foremost, above all, I am a modeler. Maybe you've know a building that I modeled. Of course, only the architectural part, and I was not alone. But that's the story for 4 years ago. Now back to IDS, or let's start with IDS. And even before I start explaining what IDS is, I'm going to tell you about the purpose. Because every output in the building industry benefits from consistent and correct information. So the purpose is meeting BIM requirements, correct models, data consistency, all that, blah, blah, you know what it is. But that's all fine. But we work for clients that are interested in smart solutions at building level, or interested in smart solutions at floor plan level and at detail level. We work for clients that sell net floor area, but need to build gross floor area in order to cash in on their investment. Now, clients, they like numbers in Excel. They like to have consistent data in Excel. And that's what they get. Excel is their MVD, their model view definition. And we provide that consistency in every phase, starting with spaces model in SketchUp that exports to IFC and Excel, of course. And later on, we link that in Rapid, and through some dynamo magic, we get the exact same spaces in the next phase. But now a little bits of data that we added in the previous phases in SketchUp are multiplied into a lot more, which is called information. And you know what clients also like? PDF. Do they like PDF? They don't even know or care that there is actually a BIM underneath that generates the annotations and fire compartment symbols and hatches for all the elements they see on their 2D output. So even before we start working with contractors or clients who actually use the BIM data, we already start to work with BIM. And we need that. We need that to work together on the project. Because requirements get more and more detailed. Now, this is a screenshot of one of the pages of the IDS design and engineering that this contractor has translated into its own requirements, its own IDS. That's what it's for, because it's a template. So these are exactly the same requirements, just in a different format. When we go to another contractor, we still have the same requirements, but again, in a different format. Plus maybe some extra requirements. Now we collect them all in a BIM execution plan. This is a PowerPoint layout, so people understand what we're going to do in the phase. I translated these agreements into an Excel, so modelers can use it. But it's still manual. They are still requirements that users read and need to implement. If only we had some tools to help us. Well, and we do with IDS in BIM Club. And this is, this is why it will be used. BIM Club and BIM Club Zoom are not new tools. We already own these. So more and more software will support IDS. And just like every tool has its own purpose, the way IDS is used will probably differ from one software to another. Now, since I use BIM Club daily, I cannot imagine someone not knowing this ecosystem. But for those of you who don't, BIM Club is an online platform for issue management. To keep track of the issues, assigning it to team members in your own company, but foremost with your design partners. Now, my favorite tool is not a website where you can find all my mistakes. It's BIM Club Zoom itself. So besides browsing through the model, I can create smart views that are filters, smart properties that are more advanced filters, create useful clashes, not as advanced as other tools, but as architects, we can do everything we want with these clash functionalities. Lists, which are like information takeoffs that can be exported to Excel and CSV. And of course, where it all started, issues, reading, creating, zooming through them, exporting them all through the BCF open standard. And now there is conflicts, data checks according to the new IDS standard. So what is the purpose of our IDS? That is, of course, automation. But automation of what? You see, I model in Revit. My colleague architects we work with on the same project, they work in Archicad. I check in BIM Club Zoom. Other model checkers use Solibri. Clients, they really like to use Revisto. Contractors like Navisworks, of course, and everything the Autodesk Cloud has to offer them. Is why we use IFC as an open standard. Choose the tool that suits you best. And the better your IFC export is, the better someone else can read it. And it works very well. Now we have a lot of people whose jobs has changed from building engineering to model checking. And I think that's a waste of resources, since basically everything that is agreed upon in the BIM execution plan can be checked automatically with an open standard that is IDS. So checking something automatically, that sounds like a clash control, which it is. IDS is just clash control for data. What we do is we clash the required information. Now, since IDS is a standard, the best part of it is the interoperability. If I want to write one in Notepad, that's up to me. BIM Club Zoom can import it. There we can continue working, and then we can export it again, so someone else can use it in some other software like Akka or Penalty or whatever, or the other way around. Now, I see you thinking, oh, man, IDS is just another file format humans can't read, right? No. It's just XML. We can read it just fine. But with simple tools, your manager can read it too, and even write them. But that's not the tool I'm going to show you today. Now, when you've done some model checking, it's quite easy to understand. This is my list of smart views that I run for the models that I export. So let's run the NL SFB tabel 1 classification code. Well, when I say I run them, I actually double click them and look at the results manually. So I can see the exterior walls with a specific code, 21 dot something. But what I can't see are the walls that need to have this code. I need to run a different smart view to see what the walls need to have this code. And from there on, I need to manually create issues for the modelers to fix this. But that's where the IDS standard comes into play. an information delivery specification. It contains, besides a description, applicability, and requirements. Now, here a requirement applies to an element. So here we say a wall that has reference containing 21 is where the requirements should apply to, the applicability. So this wall should have an NLSB code that is 21 dot something, and this wall should have the property is external in the pset wall comment set to true. Those are the two requirements. So for the more visual-minded among us, this is the wall I modeled in Revit that has a classification code 2112, which is the 4-digit code we prescribe in the BIM-based IDS. And it's an external wall. So when the function is set to exterior, it will be exported to its external true. And the property will end up in the pset wall comment. So how does this specification look like in BIM Club? Well, this is it. This specification consists out of 3 parts: a description that says exterior walls should have NLSB code 21 and should be is external. Then the applicability, so all elements of the property reference in pset wall comment are 21. So if the IDS has found all these elements, then it will look for the requirements. So it should be the entity of IFC wall, the value in the classification called NLSB tabel 1 should be 21 something, and the property in pset wall comment is external should be set to true. So let's find those unclassified walls. Well, I manually run the smart view where I filter the unclassified objects. And now let's find them with IDS, with a specification that I just showed you. And run that in BIM Club Zoom. So the results are similar, but by running the specification as if it were a clash control, BIM Club Zoom finds the wall that does not comply to the requirement. So this selected wall has neither of the 2 requirements. And since we run it like as if it were a clash, it actually is a clash. So we can report it to issues that can then be resolved by the modelers in their own software with the BCF manager, where IDS can also be viewed. Now, finding conflicts is nice, but preventing them is better. Besides checking and reporting issues, we modelers can use the IDS in our own software as a reference as well, through this new IDS palette in Revit. And of course, this will find its way to all the BCF connectors. Now, for me, this will be very helpful. I can create specifications that are clear to the modelers and checked easily. So IDS users, they really fall into 3 categories, personas. So what IDS persona will you be today? Do you write the requirements? Or do you also check the models? A writer who checks, or are you a modeler that also checks your model? I think we are at least 2 out of those 3 personas. Now, you may have noticed the term facet in the specifications I have shown you so far. These are basically the different ways of specifying the requirements. Now, I'm not sure why the term facet has been chosen, but I'm sure someone here will. I will tell you what I think. Because what is the most commonly known object of desire that has facets? Well, diamonds, of course. And every facet is one shiny side of the same rock. Same for the facets of IDS. Diamonds have a lot, facets only has 6. Attribute, property, entity, classification, material, and part of. Now, the users will not really see the difference between the facets when creating or running IDS in BIM Club Zoom. But still, it's important to know the difference. So of course, I will explain all 6 of them. And if you have any burning questions, if I get back to this menu, well, you can ask some questions. I'm not sure if they're already some questions, but yeah,
we don't have any questions so far,
No.
but if anyone would like to use the chat function, please post them there and we can. Oh, we do have one that's come in. Where do you create an IDS? Are there any websites or tools?
Yes, BIM Club is a great tool where you can use it. I think that the people from Cubis are also here, so they might say when they will release it, because this was just this is the beta version of the IDS in BIM Club. So I'm not sure when it will be released, but that is one. And I think the AKA software, that's also one of the sponsors of the buildingSMART, you can already use that. And of course, you can just start typing XML. It's quite easy.
We had a comment that you can check the GitHub for IDS example tools.
Yeah.
And there's another question. Is there an open source tool similar to IFC doc for MVD?
I have no idea, actually.
And another example was IFC tester for Python. Another question, could you say that IDS is like a standardized approach of smart views, etc.?
It is a standardized approach, yeah. For if you would compare it to smart views, that's great, because that's basically you create small filters that you run on your models. But of course, in other software, I mean, Solubri is probably called something else, but it's it's a standardized way, and that's really great, because it's the same as a filter, but it also shows you the result and it shows you what it needs to be. So if you make a mistake, there are a lot of examples coming on what will happen if you run an IDS. What will be, it will say what it needs to be, instead of just saying, I can't find it or not.
Brilliant. Next question, can we use IDS in a similar way to BCF, where we can import and export them out of BIM Collab Zoom?
The result of the IDS can be exported as an issue. Yeah, you can create issues out of that and report it into an automated clash results, like you can do with BIM Club Zoom. And if other software will use it, then it will probably be the same. But basically, the result of an IDS is a clash, a data clash.
Thank you. And how do you present the requirements for the modelers?
I'm not sure yet how exactly I will do that. But I think by creating the IDS, by creating the specifications, and then letting my colleagues run them on their models and then see the results.
When is the official version of IDS going to be published?
1.0, not sure, but it's coming quite soon, I think.
We had a comment, someone feels the IDS is still not ready and able to do everything that was possible with MVD and buildingSMART.
Yeah, you need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
If we start using it, we can start by using the simple things, and then if we get used to how it works, then we can incorporate the advanced stuff.
And following on from that, what are the current limitations of IDS?
I have something in the end on what I would like to see added to the new versions. So I will, if you could wait for that, then I will show you some things that are not possible yet.
Another question regarding your experience in documenting exchange requirements. How do you do it for someone who's currently using MVD XML?
I'm not sure. I understand the question.
I bring the. I'll read the question again.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of maybe some more general questions that people are actually involved with creating the IDS are maybe a bit better to answer, maybe in the chat. I think it's good that I continue with the first facets.
Yeah,
you can, because we still have we're still only halfway there.
plenty to get through. Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
carry on and then carry on with questions at the end of your presentation.
So let's look at all the facets, and let's start with the easiest one, which is the entity facet. Because every specification will have to do with entities. And what you see here is the BIM-based IDS version 1, where we said we would like you to use entities. And then we evolved in version 2 that we also said, let's also add the type enumeration, because that's obviously very important to the model structure. Now, when I said in my intro that I would like you to pay attention so you could repeat my words to the future users, this is basically it. Because what I'm about to show you is something that you already know, but this is like a good way of explaining it to other people. This is how I do this in my presentations or for students, to explain why you should need entities and especially type enumerations. So I usually start simple. You know that this is a door, which is an IFC door, and a window, or door in a window. But the most difficult part of IFC is just a rectangle. This simple rectangle can be anything. And when you look at it and you see that there are a few more rectangles stacked upon it, you could think, oh, maybe that's the floor and this is the ceiling. But that's just what we humans see. We need to give it a name. And this slide is in Dutch on purpose because the Dutch words, the Dutch names for these rectangles are quite different from English. The English words are a bit, well, they're more similar. So actually, what we have is IFC slab and IFC covering. And what you see is that where's the ceiling? IFC ceiling does not exist. And that's why we need to have these enumerations to further specify what kind of covering it is. So entities and enumerations, I mean, still it can be difficult, but half of the elements here you see have undefined enumerations. And that could be fine, but not for coverings and railings. So we need to check that with IDS. Now, as I've shown, the ceiling is very different from flooring or cladding. So checking for enumerations is an important check. So this isolated element is an IFC covering. But what kind? We don't know. Is it a ceiling or a flooring? So so I read this documentation, and on GitHub there is an excellent documentation, but I did find this. I came across this in the entity facet documentation that says predefined types are optional or not required. Well, I think that should be fixed in an update. Now, after entities, I think that properties are the most easy. I mean, properties are the core of BIM data. And even though common P-sets exist, requirements often ignore them in favor of custom P-sets. So we all recognize the P-set all common here, right? So what happens if I check for that? So in a model with 518 walls, I would get 2,443 conflicts, all because these 4 properties are not given for every wall. And that's not really a problem, or doesn't have to be a problem, because maybe we are still in the design phase. And every phase has its own requirements. Now, as I showed you with the IDS, properties are written in chapter 4. So they don't even need to be set in every aspect model. But when we get to the engineering phase, more information is needed. And usually contractors set their own specifications, or we can now use IDS for it. So here we have the requirements for the design phase up until the building permit. Requested data will grow during construction phase. So it would be really great if we could create an IDS and then check what we want to check. Because so we can use this specification for different phases and don't need to recreate everything with more specifications. And that's something that can be built into the tools. It's not part of the standard itself. Because the P-set that I've shown you is not really small, but I don't know if you have ever seen the ADIS IDS. I don't really want to create 4 or 5 different specifications for that. So we're looking at properties. Let's look at our favorite property, fire rating. Now this is my smart view that checks if fire rating is defined in the common P-sets of the entities that should have fire rating. It's a long list, which is fine, but it would be great to narrow it down and of course to find the mistakes. So we can do that when writing an IDS. But the requirement applies to all the entities that are shown here. And in BIM Club Zoom, we can run that, and the selected wall shows that the value of fire rating is undefined, while it should have been 0, 30, 60, or 120. Or maybe you don't want to have 0, maybe you just want a dash to indicate that it doesn't need to be fire rating. That's also possible. So attributes, we'll just do that right after this because attributes are just properties, right? Well, an attribute is not in a P-set, and therefore it's not a P. But they work just the same. Now it's hard to, for users, it's really hard to tell the difference between attributes and properties, and I'm not sure if I know all the differences. But I like to see that elements or objects that are not geometrical, they usually have these attributes like name. So let's set the IDS to check for the basic project information. Names like IFC site, IFC building, IFC building story. These are the most clear attributes for me and most important when you start a project. So before we start working together, these should be correct. Now, what you can check, of course, is the specific name for that project, and you can find spelling mistakes. And maybe if somebody exported some building story that they shouldn't, or even ignored the whole execution plan by naming a story V00. And once again, we have already agreed upon this in the BIM execution plan. So that's so great that the things that you agree upon in an execution plan can be checked automatically with IDS. But the reason why these mistakes or things are made is basically because not all modelers check these execution plans on a daily basis. or read them at all. So there's a good thing that the BCF connector is now also upgraded with an IDS palette. So the required data is exactly where the modeler is in their authoring tool. And we will probably get some large specifications to deal with. So this search bar is very welcome. And of course, more functionality will be added. So I think we're halfway through these easy facets. And I'm now browsing through the chat to see if there's something. What's the tool used for these facets? The tool is BIM Club in my case. Well, let's just continue with simple free way to create an IDS. Yeah, I'm not sure what tools are readily available yet. But I think there was already a link to the GitHub site, right? Where all the documentation is, and there are also links to the different tools. So let's continue with the classification. And you've already seen that in my first example. If you remember this slide, we've seen it before. Finding out if certain objects have the correct classification. Now, we've already seen that, so let's turn it around and see if we didn't, by accident, used slabs or roofs for covering. Because building code is structured data, so checking this should be easy, right? So instead of finding elements of specific entities to see if they belong to it, if they have a specific classification, let's just say, let's find elements that are in classification code analysis B tabel 1 47.21, a very specific one. And those should be IFC covering. Now, what you see here is the result of that data clash, where we have 6 roofs that are actually an IFC slab instead of an IFC covering. And I know you are confused because what are these strange shapes? Well, these are the roofs of our beautiful happy building in Utrecht, the Kwekerij. So yeah, let's talk about something else than just all the building codes, because that's of course structured and easy to understand, but here's a different use case for classifications. In the building phase, we keep track of the revisions. Well, not on the drawings, of course, but in the model. And we use that through 2 classification systems called the revision status, which is the description of what has changed. You see in the autocolor legend all sorts of descriptions of the things that we needed to change during construction. Well, during preparation of construction, fortunately. So this status tells us what has changed. And the other classification code tells us, the system tells us when it has changed. So, so a change in the model has to have a date as well. And this is basically a great deal of what IDS checking will be about. Not if the data is correct, but first the presence of data. So the applicability here is all elements in classification status wijziging that are defined. So you just find every element in the model that has a revision. If we find those, then the requirement should be, it also should have a date set. So basically, if you set a revision, don't forget to set the date as well. And now, since we're looking at beautiful buildings, let's continue with the material facet. And this is, again, from this excellent documentation on GitHub that says the material facet lets you filter elements where one of their materials matches your specified material. So is the purpose of the material facet just to check whether or not there is a material present? And if certain elements have a specific material? Or if that's the case, then it's, why should it be a facet? And if not, then I'm really looking forward to the development of the facet. But materials are very important, so they really deserve a separate facet. And these materials is also a great way to check for correct naming. And who's ready for another Dutch BIM initiative? The infographics never stop here, people. So we came up with a uniform and consistent list of material names. Basically, it's the value in name for IFC material, nothing else. And it's called naakt because that's naked for, so Dutch for naked, so people can easily remember it. What it actually stands for naam kenmerk toepassing, which means name, attribute, application. So name can actually be used as a classification because it's like a category, a group of specific materials. Attributes can be used as, well, the value of an attribute. An application defines the shape, like a sheet, brick, or a profile. Now it's a human readable list. And if you want to experiment, we are even in the BSD test environment. So let's see if the beams in this project are made out of concrete or steel. Well, I actually skipped the whole IDS to show you what the applicability and requirements is because, well, you know by now, right? So what you see here, that the name of the material is something else than the list that we stated. Now, these were all still 5 easy facets, and then we still have the part of, which is the most complex, and it deals with relations that, well, I'm not going to pronounce these. So IFC rail aggregates. Basically, a roof consists of 1 or more slabs. That's basically what, so there are 2 slabs that they aggregate into 1 roof. That's the relationship between them. Another good example is of part of is the IFC element assembly. So what we do is we create, I know this is not the exact way that IFC describes how to model windows, but that's how we do it in the Dutch building practice. An IFC element assembly contains IFC windows and IFC doors, and I only do this for our external windows, so is external should also be set to true. Yeah, so the applicability applies to the IFC window, IFC door, and probably IFC members should be added as well. And it should be part of an IFC element assembly. So the IFC relation aggregates into an IFC element assembly, and the property is external, should be set to true. Installations are MEP systems. So we can find the relation IFC rel assigned to group. Is every element part of a system? So this flow segment, for example, it's a pipe. Is it part of a system? But this valve is not. Now, I'm not that deep into MEP, but I would think that this valve should be part of the same system that the pipe was in. So So this information delivery specification deals with applicability and requirements, and both can choose from 6 facets. And that's all very straightforward and not that difficult, right? It's actually quite basic. So what's next? Well, next, after basic, comes advanced, of course. Advanced specifications. And that's what is still missing in IDS. And if you read the documentation, there's a whole list of what the people that are creating the IDS would like to add in future versions. Now, I would like to highlight this one. This is something I would like very much. The names of all door types must be unique, not just for doors, but for spaces as well. So if you remember this slide, we have a specific requirements for rooms and spaces. So every room in the model must start with the building letter, followed by the building story, which is the number, and then a specific code from the room function according to a specific list. And at last, a unique number. So the specification can be all spaces should have a unique number. Or if you go further, maybe all spaces on each building story, because at every building story, we start counting at 1 again. So maybe the requirement is the last 3 characters should be unique at every building story. So this was something that's already in the pipeline, and I've highlighted it to let you know that this is my favorite one from the list, but I want more, please. I would like to check an escape route, for example. So the 3 highlighted stairs are not contained in a space that is a fire exit. You see here that these staircases are not inside a space. That's because this smart view just checks for a fire exit. So how do we check? Because we know that fire exit is a property that's used for IFC space, IFC zone, door, stair, and ramp. They all have a property fire exit. And if a stair is a fire exit, the space it is in should also be a fire exit. But this is, I think, a true data clash through relationships of objects with spaces and zones. So IFC stair with property fire exit is true. Requirement is contains in an IFC space with property fire exit is true. And of course, the other way around. If you have a space that is fire exit, then find the stairs that are in those spaces, and they should also have fire exit. This is not possible yet, and I think because it's a bit of a nested specification. And maybe it's you don't check it that much. So maybe let's check for something that is similar. Let's check for another example. National regulations, like Bouwbesluit, the Dutch building regulations, is maybe a bit straightforward to understand. The width of the entrance to certain rooms must be at least 850 millimeters. And yes, I can check that with a clash control, as you can see here. We have 37 inaccessible rooms, well, according to the regulations. But that's only because the door lining is physically clashing with the space. Because the door is so detailed that the lining is actually clashing geometrically with the space. And you can understand that if we have a sliding door that is exactly really in the wall, or maybe a design door that doesn't grab the wall around it, or maybe just some wooden door that doesn't even geometrically clash with the space, we cannot find this. So yeah, I think that this is also one of the relationships should be added to part of. Now, I hope you have a good understanding of IDS and how it can be useful in your daily workflow. So we are at an hour now already, so we still have some time. We calculated some time to discuss. So let's do that while we look at a demo that Cubus made for BIM Club to show you how you can create and use IDS in BIM Club.
Thank you very much, Menno, for your presentation. There's been lots of healthy discussion around it, so it seems like a very important area at the moment.
Very good.
And one question we had, thank you for the presentation. Could you maybe send the download link? So we will be sending a link with the PDF version of your presentation, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. And we have a question. Can you create an IDS in BIM Collab Cloud and also in BIM Collab Zoom?
Yes, you can actually only create it in BIM Club Cloud. And then if you connect with BIM Club Zoom, I think that this is what it's now running. So BIM Club Zoom is just the viewer, the checker. So you create it actually in the BIM Club Cloud environment.
Another question, other than BIM Collab, are there any other platforms or tools that will support the IDS?
Of course. I see Daniel Gijsbets is reacting that he will do that in his Dux IQ software. Yeah, and Pillar, of course. Yeah, since it's version 0.9, it's not yet version 1. I think that all the tools that are actually being developed as we speak. Especially yesterday, there was the ELS configurator, which is an IDS configurator, and that has been working on for a couple of years now. That will support IDS, where you can actually, it's one big website with a wizard where you can create your own IDSs, it's quite elaborate. You can do quite a lot. And for now, it's also still an MVP, but it works. And in the new version, or in the coming update, they will also start being able to exporting and importing IDS XML files. So, and I think that also the akka software has it. I think Plannerly, you can create it in Plannerly. And for the rest, I don't know on the top of my head any other software, but there are a lot. There are already some, and a lot will come. I think this year will be the year of IDS.
Sounds very exciting. Can you create IDS in a BIM Collab Cloud demo or only the paid accounts?
You can run them in BIM Club Zoom only in the Pro version, but I'm not sure because I'm not employed by Cubus, but probably you would need an account, but maybe someone from Cubus can answer that if they are here. I hope so.
Sergey is mentioning the importance of having version 1.0 of IDS, just because it can be quite open to interpretation at this point.
Yeah, but I think that I heard Arthur Tomzak say somewhere that what is now version 0.9 point something will be in 1. So nothing will change at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what you see now is also version 1. Oh, that was it.
Brilliant. I'll bring those other slides up.
I'll just scroll through the chat, see if I missed something.
And if people do have more questions, where's the best way to contact you, or how can people carry on this discussion?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, probably. That's the fastest way.
Brilliant. Well, we seem to have a lot of thanks coming in, so I think a lot of questions have been answered for now. And if there are no more questions coming in, we can bring this webinar to a close. So thank you very much, Menno Mekes, for your time and brilliant presentation. And thank you everyone for your participation and making this a very lively discussion. And we look forward to all the next steps of IDS.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.